Housing to me is security. It's having somewhere to lay your head at night that's secure and safe, and you know that when you close your door that it's yours. You know, everyone in Ireland should have the right to housing.
You couldn't underestimate the value of housing to get people's life turned around.
It's not just bricks and mortar, it's about knowing that you've got someone there who cares and that's going to make sure that you're safe in bed at night, or that if your needs change that they will be met through some other means.
Well, I think, look, the Irish Council for Social Housing is the national federation for all the approved housing bodies. So its strength is in its number and its collective efforts, representing large organisations and smaller ones. That's been its strength because it's able to listen to what people on the ground are saying regarding funding, regarding services, and learn from each other. And that's a wonderful shared collective learning.
Good afternoon, everyone. You're all very welcome to the ICSH webinar on retrofitting the AHB sector.
It's a federation, it's an umbrella organisation, it's an educator, it's a source of information, it's a pool of knowledge.
Over the last 40 years, we've seen some significant changes in the sector, in our membership. That's grown from a very small organisation into a sector now which is providing both social housing and affordable housing for a wide range of families in the country.
We had very limited state support, but nothing that would allow us to drive forward a whole sector of housing that would cater for homeless people and for the elderly and for a new group, one-parent families, who again had quite low priority for public housing.
Yeah, and a lot. I think at that time it was disjointed. Yeah. There was projects here, there, but there was no cohesive body or grouping to try and pull this together with the various strands. The cooperative to developing, the homeless became a huge factor, and how we were going to deal with that in the Irish context. And that's what drew us together generally. Common issues with common problems, and with provision of housing and the funding thereof being one of the fundamental issues that confronted us.
The big challenges, of course, in those early days was the extent of homelessness, and there was a lot of street homelessness. The closure of the psychiatric hospitals had created lots of problems, but also the local authorities weren't really in a position to deal with it. It was really something outside their powers or experiences, and the voluntary housing associations really filled an important role. As well as that, they began to develop housing for older people. Very important models developed around the country, housing for people with disabilities. These were things that local authorities really had no skills in terms of developing.
The Department of Local Government, as it was then, later the Department of Environment, they had made improvements, they had responded. Weren't too sure always what we were talking about, but they were certainly interested because they could see that there were gaps in the housing system, needs that hadn't been thought about before. People who had had mental health difficulties in their lives, these people who've been living in hostels all their lives, that were almost forgotten, sort of hidden homeless, the emergence of single parents. So improvements were made. The result was the capital assistance scheme, and improvements made in that. So we were getting to the point where, in return for state funding paid through the local authorities, that we could actually initiate more projects, good initiatives that had never been tried in Ireland before. I recall too that in 1991 a new capital funding scheme was introduced which enabled housing associations to start developing more housing projects for families. And this was an indication of an increase in housing need, partly related to a rise in our population. The end of emigration that people in our generation could remember, and that housing associations had started to develop housing for families as well as for single people, playing a more general housing need. And that need is continuing and has become quite serious now because, again, we now see nurses, teachers, look to our own families who can't afford to buy a house.
Same principles that we started out with, indeed, that there was a need for a just, equitable and balanced housing, indeed, system, that everybody, indeed, has, indeed, the right to have access to housing of, indeed, good standard, with security, indeed, of and tenure. You know, that's the same. That's what we started off with.
It's the wheel going round again.
We're still there.
So I suppose working in collaboration with other AHBs, again, sharing ideas, getting ideas around tenant engagement, tenant involvement, involving the service users as well. So it's really important, I suppose, to have that openness and those working relationships with the Irish Council of Social Housing and other AHBs, again, just so that our main focus is on the tenant and providing the best service possible to our tenants.
One of the major challenges that has been ongoing over recent times is the affordability of housing and also the lack of supply.
An emphasis really does need to be put on affordability from the government at the moment.
I think it's crucial that the Irish Council of Social Housing, AHBs, all other stakeholders come together and try to alleviate some of the hardship that is experienced by people in Ireland at the moment in terms of housing.
We've had many achievements in terms of new housing, new types of housing, increase in scale, and also increase in innovation in terms of regeneration of properties and in rural and urban areas. So it has been a broad acceptance. The sector has played a major role over the last 40 years in the delivery of housing in Ireland, particularly in sort of niche areas of social and affordable housing.
It has given great confidence to the sector. It has hugely increased the competences. And generally, I would say it has improved the lives of those who live in social and supported housing enormously.
Housing is not just a roof. That individuals should feel part of a community to which they can be attached. That held a lot of these communities together. And it came through housing. And I think this is part of, Irish Council were advocating down the years, and a very important element I don't think we should forget.
Oh, I love it here. We're well looked after. Really great people.
Housing is actually core of what people need to give themselves that sense of safety, security, and to start rebuilding lives.
You know, there are no great accolades or awards for this work, but it's actually really valuable work. It's really significant work for the society, for a fairer society, sustainable society. So I would say people should take pride in the success of social housing in Ireland.